Hello, friends, and welcome to 2% the podcast, where we break down the fundamental strategies used by today's leading direct-to-consumer brands to learn how they're getting 2% better in their business every day. This show is brought to you by Corso, the #1 collaborative commerce platform for direct-to-consumers' best brands. Today's episode is all about shipping and customer experience, and more particularly, what to do when ship hits the fan. I'm joined by Molly Meetz, a CX leader and the current director of CX over at Corso. In this episode, I'm going to have Molly give us a framework for handling two of the most common e-commerce shipping issues, and that is shipping delays and shipping perishable goods. We're going to talk about a playbook for dealing with these things and how to use automation and process to really crush these things and turn them into actually superpowers for your business. I also ask Molly questions like how to deal with pissed off customers. What kind of tools and automation should we have set up for our CX team? How can we turn our CX team into a retention superpower? And then lastly, we're going to finish with shipping insurance and if it's the right move for your business. This episode is near and dear to my heart as I've spent a lot of time in the shipping and CX space and evangelizing the transactional channel. So I couldn't be more thrilled to give you guys a playbook for handling these shipping issues. And with that, I present to you, Molly Meetz. Hello, friends, and welcome back to this week's episode. Today, I am joined by Molly Meetz, the director of CX over at Corso. Molly, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. So excited to be here.
Of course, and I think we've got a furry friend with you. Who's that with you as well?
This is Ladybird. She doesn't like it when I'm on calls, so she is going to be, I guess, a guest.
Honorary guest.
Well.
I love it.
Yes.
Cool. Well, Molly, today we're going to be talking about a lot of tactical advice and get 2% better around handling common shipping related issues as it pertains to e-commerce stores. We're going to chat about why CX teams can be a brand superpower, shipping protection and insurance, and a lot more, I think, through this. But this is an episode near and dear to my heart, coming from my past role at Wonderment, dealing with shipping and all the stuff that when ship or shit hits the fan, and how do you deal with some of those issues. So I'm excited to chat about that. But first, who is Molly Meetz? What's your background like, and how did you get here today?
That's a great question. I actually came from the fashion industry. I worked in fashion for 10 years after college. I worked for an agency and was an account manager and brand manager. I sort of over the last 5 or so years have pivoted away from being an account manager and more onto the actual CX side of things. I think it's really the moment for CX right now. Brands are really putting a lot of emphasis into it, and I sort of hit the ground at exactly the right time, just becoming passionate about it and sort of diving a little bit further into that side of it. But I've always worked with people and always worked with like the brands and the actual customers. And so it just sort of fit organically.
I love that. Yeah, I think I couldn't agree more too. It's like, I think this is the moment for CX in a lot of ways. It's a shame that like we're calling it the moment because CX has like always been a big piece of a business as far as like, you know, the invent of commerce in general. But like, I think when we think about where we're at today, like everyone's talking about CX. I think there's like this renaissance, if you will, of all these great thought leaders and faces in the space. So it's a great time, but I love to be able to produce more content just generally around, you know, what does great look like within CX, and one of those components being really the shipping experience. And I think like you know, this is sort of like, I think where a lot of emphasis now is starting to happen around how can we optimize, you know, D2C as an industry of optimizations, if you will. And I think like we're thinking about now like some of those low-hanging fruit, and the shipping experience being one of those. It can be a make or break, I think, opportunity for D2C brands, for customer shopping with them, all that. How important do you think the shipping experience is for e-commerce when we think about like customer retention and just all the different things that a D2C business might face within that?
Yeah, I think arguably it's one of the most important things. I really thought about this a lot, and you know, I'm a fan of a lot of brands that I've never actually purchased from. And I always think about this, that if I actually did do my first purchase after being a fan for such a long time, and it was a bad experience, whether it was a bad shipping experience and I never went to the brand about it, or if I did go to the brand about it and it was overall, they didn't solve my problem. Yeah, so I think it is one of the most important things on actually keeping people happy. I think if obviously the product is the most important, I think after that, I think how you handle the customer experience and especially post-purchase is so important for keeping those customers happy and to keep them being a fan of yours. I think we all know that word of mouth is so important, especially in the age of social media. So you could get it right 1,000 times, but if you miss that one time and it just happens to be someone that's going to sort of blast your name across platforms or go tell every single one of their friends, obviously you want to try to avoid that.
1,000%, yeah. And I think that's an interesting comment there because I think for we think about commerce and like the pre-social era, what a brand put out there in the world was like what the brand was, so like Crest toothpaste, whatever you see on TV and in ads, that's like who they are. But then we have the advent of social now, and all these different things that are popping up, and like the real experiences are coming up more and more. Like word of mouth has just cascaded, I think, in a lot of ways to now where like, yeah, that one shitty CX moment can be like a PR nightmare for a brand if not handled effectively. And shipping being like a big piece of that too. I think like I've read some stats depending on where you look at it. Like one bad CX moment can can be like up to like 50% potentially like increase in like them just not coming back and buying again. Wherever that stat shakes out, there's differing opinions on that, but I think it's like shines a light on the fact that a great customer journey across the post-purchase experience is so important. I wanted to kind of like now frame up, I think, within this. So you definitely have called out how important it can be, but like I think like I wanted to for this episode talk about like two common scenarios that a lot of brands I think face with shipping specifically, and we'll talk about both of them separately. The first one being order delays, and I think that's such a common thing that we're experiencing now. Like, what do you do when you have an order delay? How do you communicate best practice, all that stuff? And then for like brand shipping perishable goods, and you have experience with that, so I wanted to dive in on that. But to tap in on order delays and some of that kind of process there. So you came from Fresh Sends, a company that ships flowers, which is a perishable item, across the country. I'm sure anyone listening who ships perishable goods can relate that this is a pretty Herculean effort to make sure that everything goes right. Not to mention, delays that can lead to frustration on both the brand side and the customer side for a lot of reasons. But with order delays specifically, how are you handling communication and process when something goes wrong with a shipment? Call it a delay.
Yeah. So when I first started at Fresh Sense, it was a very small company. So it was just me and the founders, the three founders, right off the bat. And we were sort of wearing lots of different hats. And customer experience it wasn't done badly. It was just not something that anybody sort of had enough time for. So they were sort of waiting until the customer came to them, which is what a lot of especially small companies are doing. And then I started to sort of dig into it once I took over the role and realized that we were leaving so much on the table by doing that. As a gifting company as well, people are sending the flowers across the country to, let's say, their grandma or their friend, and maybe somebody passed away or they're just celebrating something, and you don't want to bother them and say, hey, did you get your flowers? Checking in on them. And so we were sort of just catching those people that were actually coming to us and saying, this never got delivered. It got delivered late. So obviously delivered with dead flowers in the box. And we were very quick immediately to take care of them, reship it, refund, whatever they would prefer. Obviously, we know in the DTC space, you always want to reship rather than refund to actually give them the experience that they paid for. So that it is easier to sort of keep them that way than it is to just refund their order. So when I started digging into the actual tracking numbers and realizing that it was such a small percentage of people that were coming to us and complaining who didn't get their package, or it got delivered over 48 hours late, and we would sort of assume that after 48 hours, it probably isn't going to arrive fresh. So then we took some extra steps to get a post-purchase, get a tracking platform, and work on our post-purchase instead of just having here's your order confirmation and then here's your tracking. I think we understood how important it was to add the delivered email, to get a stalled or delayed email up so that they're getting information as much as you can. Speak to your customers and let them know, like, if I have to email you 10 times to let you know that we'll take care of this and we want you to have the experience rather than not having the experience, we're going to sort of bend over backwards to sort of get you to talk to us about that so that we can fix the problem for you. And I think once you start doing that, people realize, I think we've all experienced, customers sometimes come to brands and think they're not going to help me, so I'm going to come in hot. And I think once you really, really communicate with your customers that you are not only willing to help, but you want to help, that it's in your best interest to help. It's in my best interest, obviously, for you to have a happy experience. I think that sort of just has changed the game. And a lot of people are thinking about that with retention being so important right now. The entire post-purchase sort of like email flow, I think, has become really top on people's minds to just sort of make sure that you're, like I said, communicating with your customers at every step that you possibly can be.
Totally. Yeah. And I think what you said too, it's like shifting the nature from like reactive to proactive is some kind of a conversation I feel like that we're seeing a lot now with like CX and the post-purchase experience in general. Like on that reactive side, like a lot of like what, a customer might typically think is that they have to reach out to CX. They're going to expect like a boxing match. They have their guard up. They're, maybe, have to say, hey, like this was like, this issue happened. I'm frustrated, and in the case of like ordering something that's perishable, if it shows up, not in the condition they expected, that can be a headache as well. But I think also it's like when you shift that relationship to you are now proactive and you're communicating that delay, or you're communicating just even if there isn't a delay, that just generally you're giving them updates across the way with the tracking tool, like you mentioned, with those updates via email, SMS, if you're doing that. Like the transactional channel, I think in D2C is so underappreciated because those updates are, like generally like I spend my money, I want to know where my stuff's at throughout the journey. And if there is, a snafu, something happens, I want to know as well. I think that's such low-hanging fruit for like great CX moments. And then like, if they have that issue, if they reach out, you were really transparent along the way. They have the resources with like a tracking page or some of those things too. I think like it's the little things that go a super long way in making like that great CX moment for a customer.
Yeah, definitely. And I think back to your point on just shipping perishable items, I'm sure that lots of people listening to this can empathize with it. It is kind of a nightmare. Your claim rates are much higher than a company that's selling t-shirts and shipping those across the country. So I think just having the customer have a little bit more, I guess, sort of like patience for that and understanding. Like it is a little bit trickier. If I'm ordering makeup and it's delayed by 3 days, I appreciate the company telling me that's a bummer, but it's not the end of the world. And obviously when you're telling somebody it's delayed and that means that your flowers are going to arrive dead, that's a different reaction, which is always a little bit tricky.
Yeah, it definitely is a tricky situation, I think, for a lot of brands. And to get a little more tactical on that, I'd love to understand like how you approached some of those things. It sounds like maybe some tools were in the mix here to facilitate some of this. What was sort of that workflow like if a delay happened, or in the case of like, something, maybe we start there and then we can go to the other side of the perishables. But I'm curious, like, what sort of things did you have in place to mitigate or like be proactive with some of these issues?
Yeah, definitely. So we started working with Wonderment, actually, which is sort of how we first got connected. Mm-hmm. And that was a really big help. I think just really being able to dive into the tracking numbers and seeing what was happening and having the team there help us set up our, again, we were a very small team and sort of learning as we went. And so working with teams that actually are willing to help us be successful and sort of go above and beyond was really nice. So that was sort of the first thing that we put into place after just sort of the generic, we're obviously going to help if something happens processes. And then from there, we have a pretty basic like macro system within Gorgeous that we are responding to customers pretty quickly. So I would say within like 2 hours, we're trying to have an answer to them. Because again, obviously, like with flowers, it's a little bit more time sensitive. I mean, I think that every customer experience team, like you understand that you want to, the faster you respond, the happier people are going to be.
Sure.
I think on top of that is just really what I sort of tried to pass on to anyone that I was training is to be a real person. I think when you have macros, it's really easy to just sort of like glance at the email, get the general gist of what's going on, and then just plug in your macro and move on to the next one.
Mm-hmm.
And when people are actually messaging in with some more emotion behind something rather than it just being like, hey, my order was delayed, what can you do for me? If they're giving you their story, if they're putting in little tidbits that you can really expand on in your response to them, I think that's so important. I mean, at the end of the day, I think we're all human beings that just want to be heard. And while some of us may not tell our whole life story to the customer experience team at a place that they bought from, some people really do. It's truly like a 50-50. And I think just taking that extra 5 minutes when you're answering something means so much. Like I know when I get a response back and somebody actually acknowledges what I said and it's very clear it wasn't a template, it means so much to me. And again, it makes me sort of like a fan for life of them to know that they have the real people behind the screen that are helping and actually care.
I totally agree. It's the empathy and the little kind of things and picking up on some of, the way they're talking with you, interfacing. Like, in the case of like, with Fresh Sends, I imagine, people sending out these, for maybe gifts, like you mentioned, maybe they're sending them, for various scenarios that like can be maybe a moment for you to like really like build a relationship, build a little bit more of a mutual understanding of, hey, we're going to make this right, making them at ease, if you will. Some of the, obviously the automations that you have, but then the additional, like, the one-to-one communication touch points, they all build into that, I think, relationship that you're trying to build and nurture with the customer. I'm curious too, like, do you think that honesty and transparency with a shipping delay, like for a lot of brands, I think listening, they might be like, hey, I don't want to tell a customer their order is delayed. I'm concerned that this is a common thing we got at Wonderment, like all the time was, why would I tell a customer of a negative moment? So I'm curious, like as like a CX leader, like how you thought about some of those things. Like, did you want to be proactive? Was that I guess talk to me a little bit about how you kind of thought about that.
Yeah. So I am of the mindset that you should be completely transparent and very honest to an extent. Like I don't have to tell somebody the nitty gritty about what happened and why their order is delayed. Like if it was on our end, why we didn't get shipped out when it should have been. But I think transparency is really important. And that sort of did pop up for us at Fresh Sends when we started using Wonderment. It was a little bit of that, like, do we alert these people? Because if they're not coming to us, if it doesn't arrive, are we just telling them that something bad happened when they didn't realize something bad happened? Mm-hmm. And I think they notice just because folks aren't coming to you and telling you, hey, I know that this got delayed, or it looks like this has been stuck in this hub for 3 days. I think along with just being a real person, people want your honesty. They want your transparency. And I'm much more likely to have a little bit of leeway with a brand if they are being honest with me, rather than a brand who's just seems so big that they don't even have time to answer my question. And I sort of go back and forth on that, where like if I have something that was shipped to me and it is a little bit delayed, I'm like, well, I look at tracking numbers all day long. And I know that is probably still going to get to me. And even though I'm antsy to get it, but if I do actually email a brand, having them actually respond in sort of like a timely manner and letting me know what's going on. And we know that when people email us about a UPS delay or a FedEx delay, we don't know much more than they know. Mm-hmm. And that sometimes is hard with customers because they want to say, well, go figure out why it's delayed. I'm like, well, who knows why it's delayed, but
Sure.
let's get it taken care of for you if it doesn't arrive now in a timely manner. Yeah.
I think no, it's so true. I think like it also is just a moment for you to like, yeah, like we're talking about here, you build a relationship with the customer, you let them know that's like you really genuinely value their experience as a shopper. And even if like, there's so many things as a D2C brand that are out of your control, and shipping, is sort of this black box, like a USPS might just not scan the label, or something like that happens, and like for that reason, like they don't have an updated tracking number. But like if the customer didn't get that email, or you're not looking in, and you don't reassure them that you're looking into it, or that you're going to make it right if something happened, like those are the little tweaks, I think, in the customer journey that can like make them not come back again, that can make them go onto social and flame you for having a negative moment, or ruining whatever, if it was a gift or something. You never know like what the story is, but I feel like the best weapon that a CX team can have is just to be really communicative and have empathy at the end of the day for the customer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think it goes a long way in just sort of building that trust between your customers and you, because like we've sort of said, and there's a million different products for anything that you might be looking at on the market now. So if my product is the absolute best for you, but I'm giving you a terrible experience after you gave me your money, obviously you don't care. You're
Yeah.
going to get that product, and even if it fixes every problem you've had for the last year, you're not coming back to that company. You're going to go down the street, you're going to go to Target, you're going to go somewhere else. So you want to give them every single reason to be a fan and be loyal of your brand.
Yeah, CX is it can be a superpower for brands when we think about retention. Like all this emphasis seems to be like have this email flow or have this like whatever campaign running, but like great CX is like never going to go out of style, because it just is like that. To me is like the make or break moments when you reach out, when you open up, when you're trying to get help from a brand, or even just generally have those positive touch point moments. One thing I wanted to ask you on too, so obviously delays can piss off customers. How do you diffuse or deal with customers who might be frustrated then with the delay? Do you have any like best practice advice around something like that?
Yeah. So now working at Corso, to use that as an example, because we are dealing with customers that bought a plethora of different things. So they might have bought a beauty product, they might have bought a t-shirt, they might have bought I'm trying to think, golf balls or something like that. So
Mm-hmm.
I think trying to approach it on a case by case basis and really understanding, like sometimes people are just coming to you to say, it looks like this is delayed. Can you give me an update, or can you let me know? And they might be mad about it, but you don't necessarily need to like bend over backwards quite yet. If somebody comes and they say, I ordered this bag for this vacation, we leave tomorrow, it's delayed, I'm not going to get it, I'm super pissed off about the whole experience. I think that is where handling customers on a case-by-case basis is super, super important, especially for us, because the emotions are different. The
Sure.
intent behind the purchase is completely different for each person who comes to us. And our entire theory is that we want the customers to be happy, because then they're happy with whatever brand they purchased from. So trying to sort of mitigate anything that could sort of come to us, like let's look and see what overnight shipping would be for that bag that they needed by tomorrow. And if it's not astronomical, let's cover it for them.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see if we can figure out a different sort of fix to the problem where, we're not going to do this reorder until you get back from vacation. You're not going to be able to use it on this trip. That's really unfortunate, but we'll make sure that you get it when you get back. That way it's not sitting in your mailroom or sitting on your front stoop the entire time you're gone. Or maybe a refund is the best option. Again, we sort of touched on the fact that we would all, I think in our industry, we would rather have a reorder so that they can experience the actual brand. But we are just a little bit more concerned with making sure that each person is happy by the time they leave our touch point. And I think that everyone in customer experience, especially nowadays, sort of feels that. You want them to leave a bad situation having a good feeling about it, having a good feeling about their brand. Most people come to Corso and don't realize that they're not actually talking to the brand that they bought from. which is great. We would rather it be as seamless as possible. And
Sure.
if they leave and they leave us a CSAT score that says, oh, I love this bone broth, it's my favorite thing in the world, and their customer experience is great, and they don't even realize that they were talking to a third party, especially when they come in hot, I think every customer experience person's absolute favorite thing is when somebody comes swinging out the gate and, they're cussing, they're mad. And when they leave and say, I'm sorry, thank you so much for handling this for me, and then they leave you a great review, that to me is like my favorite thing in the entire world now.
It's an amazing thing to see. And I think, yeah, like you touched on, it's like, case by case basis, having empathy, diffusing, and then making them feel good about that interaction. And then throughout this too, just to kind of even recap like what we've talked about, it's like, having some of that automation and some of those tools in place, of an order tracking tool to make some of those things a little bit softer, and then having the process in place and having the team just, be able to handle those situations in the best way possible. Because like we said at the beginning of this too, like those negative interactions can really make or break all the work that's gone into acquiring this customer, to getting them to purchase all these different things. So like, these are to me like the biggest kind of like opportunities for D2C brands to like double down on, is like having great CX, having a great leader in place who gets this, who really values those things. Because as we get more and more competitive and saturated in D2C too, like, you have to just be buttoned up on all accounts. So I couldn't agree more with what you're saying.
Yeah, I love that. That's a really good point too.
Welcome to Caro, where the world's top brands and creators come together to sell each other's products through cross-store selling. You can join Caro as an online retailer, product supplier, or both. As a retailer or creator, you can sell other amazing products on your online store, allowing you to quickly expand your catalog and increase your average order value, all without the upfront costs of investment in new inventory. You simply sell more product and collect a profit. As a supplier, Caro opens up an entirely new sales channel, making your products available to be sold on thousands of other top brands and top creators' stores. Orders are sent right to their Shopify order queue, making fulfillment super easy. You're always in control as a supplier, choosing what products to make available to the network, what retailers you work with, and the margin that works best for your business. It's the biggest no-brainer in the history of e-commerce. There are literally thousands of brands and creators. Our team is ready to help you find a perfect pairing to your brand. What are you waiting for? Join Caro and start selling more together.
I wanted to bring it forward a little bit we touched on perishables and stuff a little bit here, but I'm curious if like you could offer any more tactical advice for shipping perishables and like some of the best practices around that. So like, I know it can vary brand by brand, like if they're shipping, cold goods or just food that, can go bad if it's out too long, all that stuff. But like, is there any best practice or lessons that you've learned from, a brand like Fresh Sends that you might be able to offer to the listeners here?
Yeah, I feel like that's such a loaded question. With Fresh Sends, for us, it was, what can we do at the very beginning of getting the floral product to make sure that it stays as fresh as possible for as long as possible? So if it does get stuck in a box for an extra day, it still looks good by the time it gets there. And I think now working at Corso and working with other sort of perishable food and beverage brands and sort of seeing the issues that people face with shipping that kind of thing, I think your packaging is so important. So taking that extra time to make sure, like thinking through it, shipping it across the country, what does it look like when it arrives? Like what could possibly go wrong in transit? Throw it around a room and make sure, because that FedEx and UPS aren't handling it with care. It doesn't matter how many times it says it on the box. It can be totally roughed up. And so that was something that I really liked that at Fresh Sends they did. It was, let's like really test this packaging, because obviously, or not obviously, but at Fresh Sends the packaging was a huge reason why you paid the money for it, because it was such an Instagrammable moment. So if it shows up, the flowers look good, but the box is a wreck, it kind of still would defeat the purpose. So So I think that's something that I've learned. I also think it's just sort of working through the shipping partners and who you should actually work with. This is sort of an outside case, but I started ordering Imperfect Foods, which is a food delivery service that is a little bit less expensive because it's maybe the produce doesn't look as great. I don't know what they use for shipping. I'm going to be perfectly honest. I think that they like use their own shipping, but it always comes on time. They're always super friendly. They never have a problem getting into my apartment building. And I'm not sure how they do it, but I have been so impressed every time I get a box from them. I sort of feel like they need to be selling their services for like the Fresh Sense of the world. Like how can they also utilize that, like a smaller company that doesn't have the resources to have a van in every big city, personally dropping off those boxes? I'm not really sure if I have a great answer to it, but I have a lot of case studies, I guess, now to be looking at and thinking about it on a fairly regular basis of I would love to know when somebody actually perfects shipping perishable goods.
Anyone listening who's looking for a business idea, I think we've found one here. No, but you're so right. I think like that's a great example with Imperfect Foods. I've ordered from them, great experience, and I think like definitely like a North Star for anyone looking to how to optimize that. I mean, obviously, as you've pointed out, it's a lot to get it right every time, and it won't be right every time. You know, I think like that's just the nature of shipping. Like FedEx is going to throw the package around. It's going to get lost. Another scenario I'm thinking of that I'd love to get your take on too is even like maybe I'm busy all day and I don't get home. And by the time I get home, that package is, you know, maybe it's spoiled or something happened to it. So on that side, like how important is communication then, like with the automated emails and maybe the texts that go out, letting a customer know that it's out for delivery and then it's been delivered? I think of Jess at Feastables. Her and I were talking a while ago, and you know they have chocolate, and that stuff melts in the hot sun if it's not picked up right away. So, how important is stuff like that, even like on the communication side?
That's a really great point. I think that's so important. I think having that instantaneous delivered email going out to folks, and I think that's a really good argument for getting people to sign up for the text messages. It is so important. Like when I know that my Imperfect Food box is being delivered, I am checking my checking my text messages all day long, making sure as soon as it's delivered, I get it out. And I'm not really sure how they do it. Even if I leave it for several hours, it still seems like it's fine. But that is another thing that it's so tricky. Because you can send text messages to people and then you're still going to have the person that says, well, I didn't know that it was outside. So with Fresh Sense, we were shipping priority overnight and then kind of experimented with just doing overnight. But if you just do overnight, it can get delivered anytime. Like it says until 8:00 at night. It could be even later than that. And so I totally understand the viewpoint from the customer on that of having a smaller window, I think is really important for anything that is perishable, and having the most communication that you possibly can to let them know that it's there. And I think even just because I live in an apartment, I think about this a lot of our packages get stolen all the time. So if I know immediately when it's delivered, then I'm running down there, I'm texting a neighbor to see if they can go get it. I think it just helps solve a lot of your problems. So instead of them having to reship me something because it was stolen out of my apartment or because it melted on my doorstep, I knew exactly when it was there, which I think alleviates a lot of problems for brands on that point.
Totally. I mean, they've gone all the way of getting it to this point, and to not have that communication, such a missed opportunity. I love that you called out the incentivizing a customer to opt in to an SMS program or an email program, whatever it is, to just get those updates. Like, I think D2C brands are always looking for moments to engage post-purchase. And I mean, I spent the last 10 months doing this, talking about the transactional channel, but I think it's such a opportunity to engage in a meaningful way, to add value, and then also just generally minimize all the things that we're talking about here, like the delays, and then the packages, potential perishable items like going spoiled, and all the different things that can happen within that. It all comes back to just communicating and having those systems in place. So I couldn't agree more with you. And something that you mentioned that I think is perfect transition over is package theft and things being stolen or things happening. So ultimately, if, ship hits the fan in another way, which is, a package is lost in transit, it's anything that the package ends up not making its way to you. I'm sure anyone listening has, had a package that's been lost in transit or stolen or whatever at some point or another. It's an incredibly common but deflating issue for both the brand and for the shopper, I think. And so very, timely, I think, conversation here. But, obviously, at Corso, you guys are doing some things around this. And so I'd love to understand, just talk to me a little bit about shipping protection and what's your take on how important something like that is?
Yeah, so I obviously am a little bit biased. I do think it is really important, but we use Corso at Fresh Send. So, they still do use it. And so that's sort of how I got introduced to the brand and shipping protection, honestly, in general. I never really wasn't something that I thought about in detail before. And now I think it's extremely important for, obviously, maybe not for every single brand on the planet, but I do think that it is really important. I think it helps put your customers' minds at ease. If I'm checking that box, especially on a brand that I'm not super familiar with how they work, it makes me feel like I'm covered. I can spend this money, and if it doesn't show up, if it gets stolen out of my apartment, because there are those times where I'm I don't know if I even want to take that chance, because am I going to get my money back? Am I going to get my package? So I think on one point, just sort of easing your customers' minds. We also sort of have a carbon offset portion of it. So we are helping as much as we possibly can. Obviously, it's the age of DTC and shipping, and I would rather have something shipped to me than go to Target. I understand that for sure. So we have a carbon offset piece of that puzzle to sort of help also ease your mind in that point as well. So you're sort of doing your part, offsetting what that would be, and helping the planet a little bit. So I think it's really important for brands of any size. So I think most brands are sort of the mindset that they're going to replace it or refund it, whether you ordered the shipping protection or not. But it just sort of helps give you that cushion. So if you are opting into that, not only do you have the peace of mind that it will be taken care of, but then I think you feel a little bit like the people who didn't opt into it. If I'm recouping the refund and reorder revenue from those other orders, then I feel a little bit easier about taking on those people that didn't order it, that didn't add that to their order. And then the next one you can say, we'll go ahead and refund this order now, but next time, to make sure you're protected, add the shipping protection or shipping insurance, whichever you're using.
I love that. Yeah, it's protecting you, the brand, protecting the customer as well, and also a good, like you mentioned, taking the chance. Not every D2C brand has the same policies on how they approach CX either, and so what might be a refund for somebody, actually might not be. Also, it's just peace of mind for me if I'm shopping, like you said, with a brand I've never experienced before. I might want to pay the extra, percent or two just to get that coverage and have peace of mind that if anything happens, and everything that we've mentioned today, there's so many things that can happen, whether it's theft, being lost, all the different things that can make that up. How does it fit into a regular CX team's workflow then? I mean, say I have to, use this for a CX team listening. I might be thinking about this, how would they implement then something like shipping protection into their general workflow?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for us, we really work on a case-by-case basis. So we're going to work with your brand and exactly the way that makes sense for your customers and makes sense for your existing workflow. A big piece of what I think is so great about Corso and what I fell in love with was that the customer experience team is so passionate about what they do and so passionate about those quick answers, especially being sort of a third party handling other brands' customers. I feel like that's a scary thing to sort of let another person take that piece off of your puzzle, but also that is part of sort of what we're selling to people is that you get a white glove sort of world-class customer service team behind your brand. So we're taking those tickets off of your plate. So let's say you have 2 agents, but during Christmas and the holiday season, you are overwhelmed with tickets and you can't answer people for a few days, but we can take those off of your plate. So if somebody's coming to us after they've added Corso to their order and asking us a question that doesn't necessarily, their package wasn't stolen, maybe they're just asking for tracking. If we can find it, we'll just answer them. We're not just automatically sending them back to you. If we can find the answer, we'll give it to them. If we can't, then we'll put them in touch with your team. So we really try to make it as seamless as we possibly can. We have an integration with Gorgeous and also Zendesk. So your customer service team can just very easily file a claim for somebody if they come to you before they come to us. We want the whole experience to be your brand. So if you have, this is how we speak to our customers, we want to sort of use this language. Can you do that? Absolutely. We'll make certain macros for your brand specifically so that it's as seamless as possible. And like I said before, like we don't want people to even really realize that they're talking to Corso and not talking to, let's say, Topicals or Kinfield. We want them to know, or want them to just sort of feel like it's a very easy extension of that brand and the voice and the experience.
Yeah, when I was in the brand side, I would have loved to have had that. I think it's such a underappreciated component of what you guys offer too. I think it's really great, and I think also like what you mentioned, and we didn't even talk about this on the shipping delay side, but like reducing those tickets but also to having some of that just peace of mind for a CX team that might be burdened or might be not having the largest head count as well, if there's ways to do that, but also provide a great, experience that's consistent and has the brand, throughout that, and how the tone of the language, all that different stuff, but also the automations that can make that easier. All really good stuff that we didn't even address, but I think is another added benefit of having these things in place. Well, that's amazing. I feel like we've covered just a small percentage of like the potential issues, but also I think really, really important issues, and delays and perishables, and then also with shipping protection and why all those are so important for, like great CX and for customer retention. Looking forward now, Molly, like what trends or changes do you foresee maybe with respect to shipping and CX in the years ahead? I know another loaded question to throw at you, but like any thoughts come to mind around that for you?
So we sort of touched on this earlier, but thinking about this question, especially with like the perishable and just the shipping component of it, I think brands are going to continue being in touch with their customers, obviously at every step of the way, more so if they can. I think that, and I don't know if I've even really seen this happen yet, but I sort of feel like it needs to. I think brands are already starting to use different shipping services besides the FedEx and the UPS. And I think we're just going to see more and more of that. I hope that they have already started sort of coming to light, but I think we're going to see shipping companies that actually care about the customers and want to help the customers. It's not so hard to get in touch with them and figure out where your package is. They're not just going to tell you, nope, just reach out to the brand. I think like the VHOs of the world, which is sort of a very specific use case. And like we touched on, the imperfect foods, like however those are working, I think we're just going to see more and more of that, the sort of more custom, personalized shipping experience.
Yeah, I think it's a great prediction. I agree. I think that it'll be it's an area of optimization, but also opportunity. I think there's a lot of potential advancements that we'll see in the space, and hopefully as shipping gets even better and better, the communication process, but also to like all these best practices that we've talked about today, I think too, like those are going to continue to evolve, whether that's a mix of tech plus process, whatever that looks like. Maybe AI will replace all of us eventually in this respect. Probably not, honestly, but I digress. Let's hope not. But no, this has been a blast, Molly. I really appreciate you coming on and keeping it super tactical, I think, on how to just get better with respect to shipping, but also to like laddering it up to just great CX, great customer retention, all that different stuff. Don't have time to get to the rapid fire questions today, but I will ask you one. Who is a person or brand that you really admire in the CX space? You already mentioned a couple brands, but anyone else that come to mind?
Yeah, one that I didn't mention is Glossier. I think Glossier started to get big before CX was really on top of brands' minds. I've been a Glossier customer since they started. And the consistency behind their customer experience when you reach out to the team is incredible. It's really inspiring to see that a company can get that big and still have that be such a focus on what they're doing.
Glossier is a great call out. I think just like when you talk about like just a someone who's been innovating in the space for a while, I think they're a great call out. I think another brand that I've been really impressed by, very common, I think, called out as well, but Manscaped, I think that they're another great example of just someone who like really gets their ICP, and like when you think about every touch point I've ever had, or if I've had to reach out, talk with them, it's been super just like on brand. There's so many brands I could mention too, I think that like, obviously everyone knows about, but great call out on Glossier. That's awesome. Cool. Well, where should listeners go to get in touch with you?
Oh, that's a great question. I guess LinkedIn, Twitter. I keep saying this. I'm going to try and be a Twitter girl. So we'll see if that works. But LinkedIn, you can definitely find me there and chat me up.
Perfect. I'll link out to those in the show notes. I am trying to get on Twitter myself. It feels like I'm just watching from afar. Everyone's just like killing it over there, and I'm like trying to find my way to like get in. But it's a very, very awesome community over there. So I encourage you to get on Twitter for sure.
Yeah, you as well. Let's go have a Twitter conversation, and maybe that'll help.
Accountability buddies. I like it.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, Molly. Well, I'll let you get out of here. Thanks so much for taking the time and for dropping so much knowledge. This has been a blast. You're welcome back anytime to talk about anything CX or just generally e-com related.
Amazing. Thanks for having me. I loved being here. And thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for watching today's episode. I hope you got 2% better for watching. And if you haven't already, consider giving this video a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel so you never miss another episode. We have a variety of e-com topics to talk about this season that's going to get you 2% better each week across a variety of topics. Also, if you want exclusive content not covered in these episodes that's super tactical, head over to getcaro.com/podcast. You'll find full episode recaps, transcripts, and so much more content that we don't have time to cover in these episodes. Lastly, if you want to continue on the journey right now, I encourage you to do so. I will link to another episode right here. You can take advantage of that. Click just right there, and that'll take you to that episode. And with that, I'll see you next week on 2% the podcast.